He should not have been able to crawl that far, not through 30 miles of white silence, not with ice clinging to his fur and a secret pressed beneath his chest like the last prayer of someone who refused to give up. Before dawn touched the ridges outside Fort Drum, New York, the world had turned the color of bone. Snow moved sideways across the training road, blown hard by a January wind that made the pine trees bow and the metal gates hum low like distant church bells. The temperature had dropped below 10 degrees, and every breath came out silver. At the North Perimeter checkpoint, 3 Marines stood beneath a yellow security light, their faces half hidden by scarves and fatigue caps, their boots planted in a drift that kept rising by the minute. Sergeant Marcus Hayes was the first to hear it. Not a bark, not a whine, something softer, a scrape against frozen gravel. Marcus was 38, broad-shouldered, steady-eyed, and quiet in the way some men become after they have carried too many memories without complaint. His skin was deep brown, weathered by sun, wind, and years of service, and his gaze had the calm patience of a man who had learned that panic never saved anyone. He lifted one gloved hand, and the 2 younger Marines beside him stopped talking. The sound came again, a dragging sound, slow, uneven. Marcus turned toward the road beyond the gate, where the snow swallowed everything past the reach of the light. At first, he thought it was a loose tarp, a pale shape moving in the storm. Then the shape lifted its head. 2 amber eyes caught the security lamp and held it. A white German shepherd was crawling toward them. His coat, once bright as clean linen, was crusted with ice and gray road slush. Snow clung to his ears. His paws trembled each time he tried to pull himself forward. Around his neck hung the torn remains of a faded working dog collar, but there was no tag, no handler, no vehicle behind him, no track of anyone coming to claim him. Only the dog, the storm, and the small, stubborn sound of his body refusing to stop. Private Ellis whispered, "Sergeant, is that a K9?" Marcus did not answer right away. He stepped beyond the gate, boots crunching, wind cutting across his jacket. The dog saw him and tried to rise. He made it halfway, then sank back down, pressing one front paw over something tucked against his chest. Marcus slowed. That was when he noticed it. The dog was not just coming for help. He was guarding something. "Easy, boy," Marcus said, low enough for the storm to almost steal it. "You made it. I see you." The shepherd's eyes never left his face. He gave one broken breath, then nudged the hidden bundle closer with his paw, as if choosing, at last, who could be trusted with what he had carried through the cold. Marcus lowered himself to one knee in the snow, careful not to crowd the shepherd. He had learned long ago that wounded creatures measure kindness by distance first. The dog's breath came in thin white bursts, each one shaking through his ribs, yet his paw stayed fixed over the bundle as if it were a sacred thing. Behind Marcus, Private Ellis and Corporal Reed moved closer, their faces tense beneath the pale glow of the checkpoint lamp. "Get the thermal blanket from the guard shack," Marcus said, never taking his eyes off the dog. "And call the base veterinarian. Tell Dr. Amelia Brooks we have an unidentified working dog at the north gate. Possible exposure, possible dehydration." Reed ran without another word. The shepherd flinched at the movement, his ears flattening, but Marcus lifted his palm. "Easy. Nobody here is going to take anything from you." The dog stared at him for a long second, then gave a sound so small it almost disappeared beneath the wind. Marcus reached slowly, inch by inch, until his glove touched the frozen fur along the dog's shoulder. The shepherd trembled, but he did not pull away. Up close, Marcus could see how young he was, maybe 4 years old, with a strong frame hidden beneath exhaustion and a face too noble for the road that had brought him here. His collar was government issue once, or close to it, the fabric worn smooth from use, the buckle scratched, the stitching partly torn. On the inside, faint black letters had almost vanished beneath ice. Marcus brushed them gently with his thumb. Not a name, just 2 numbers and 1 word. Unit. Something in Marcus tightened. This dog had belonged somewhere. Someone had trained him, fed him, trusted him, maybe prayed beside him on nights when the world felt too far from home. "Sergeant," Ellis said softly, returning with the blanket. Marcus took it and eased it around the shepherd's back. Warmth met cold with a whisper of steam. The dog closed his eyes for half a breath, then forced them open again, panicked, paw pressing harder to the bundle. "I know," Marcus murmured. You did not come all this way for yourself." He shifted his hand toward the hidden object. The shepherd gave one warning rumble, not angry, only desperate. Marcus froze. The wind rattled the chain-link fence. Snow beat against his cheek. "All right," he said. "We do it together." He placed his other hand beside the dog's paw, not over it, letting the shepherd feel the choice. For a moment, nothing moved but the storm. Then, slowly, with a trust that seemed to cost him everything, the white German shepherd lifted his paw. Beneath it lay a small waterproof field pouch, scratched, frozen at the edges, and wrapped in a strip of olive green cloth. Marcus saw dark printing on the cloth, half hidden by snow. A Marine Corps name tape. Hayes stopped breathing for one quiet second as the letters came clear. It was not his name. It belonged to someone missing. Marcus lifted the field pouch carefully, snow falling in soft, silent flakes around him. He glanced down at Blizzard, whose amber eyes were locked onto the pouch as if it held the answer to a question no one else had asked. The dog's fur shimmered faintly beneath the yellow light, white with streaks of frost, every muscle tense and waiting. Marcus unfastened the pouch, the sound of the zipper dragging through ice barely audible over the whistling wind. Inside, there was a folded piece of paper, damp at the edges but intact, and a small, worn dog tag, scratched and bent in several places. The tag read, "Private First Class Benjamin Archer, a Marine listed missing from a patrol in upstate New York the previous winter." Marcus felt a lump rise in his throat as he held it against his chest, and Blizzard let out a small whine, nudging him with his nose. It was clear that the dog had carried this object all the way through the blizzard, over snowdrifts taller than the Jeep's tires, through nights so cold that even his own breath had frozen before it could hit the air. Marcus unfolded the paper and read the words aloud, his voice low, almost swallowed by the storm. "Blizzard found me." And a date, 3 days ago. The realization struck him. This was not just a K9 seeking warmth or shelter. Blizzard had been tracking someone, guarding someone, guiding the lost to those who could help. He glanced around, the horizon barely visible beyond the curtain of white, and imagined the small figure of PFC Archer somewhere out there, exhausted, cold, needing help. Marcus adjusted his scarf against the wind and whispered, "We are going to make sure he is found." Blizzard pressed closer, as if to say he already knew the plan, already trusted Marcus to carry it through. The other 2 Marines moved in, bringing the thermal blankets and setting up a makeshift shelter against the fence, their breath steaming in the bitter air. Blizzard stayed on guard, paw still lightly pressed on the pouch, eyes scanning every shadow. Marcus felt the weight of the responsibility settle on his shoulders, but also the quiet thrill of understanding. A dog, white as snow and determined as any soldier, had chosen him as a partner in this mission of mercy. Every inch of the snow around them seemed sharper, colder, yet within that moment, there was warmth, a heartbeat of purpose that neither the wind nor the storm could take away. He lifted Blizzard gently, moving him onto the blanket, letting him curl beside the pouch, as though keeping watch over the sacred cargo. The storm roared on, but within that small circle of light, there was focus, patience, and trust. Marcus traced a gloved hand over Blizzard's back, feeling the pulse beneath the fur, steady and alive, a signal that this journey had only begun. Snowflakes clung to the fur around Blizzard's muzzle, and for a fleeting second, Marcus allowed himself to feel the quiet pride that only comes from recognizing courage in another soul, silent but undeniable. He leaned back on his heels, scanning the blizzard, listening to the subtle creaks of ice-laden branches, and he thought that no Marine he had ever met had shown him such unspoken determination. Blizzard had come to him not for comfort, not for shelter, but to deliver hope, to bridge the gap between those lost and those still waiting. Marcus adjusted the pouch, securing it safely beside Blizzard, and in the dim light, he made a silent vow that they would reach the missing Marine before the night claimed another soul. The wind pushed harder, driving snow into his collar. Yet within the circle of their makeshift haven, he felt a stillness, a promise kept, and Blizzard's steady gaze reminded him that sometimes the smallest creature could carry the heaviest truths. Dr. Amelia Brooks arrived at the checkpoint 12 minutes later in a snow-dusted base utility truck, its headlights glowing like 2 pale lanterns through the storm. She stepped out with a medical bag in one hand and a scanner in the other, her navy parka zipped to her chin, her dark hair tucked under a knit cap. She had worked with military dogs for 11 years, long enough to know the difference between fear and purpose. And the moment she saw Blizzard curled beside the field pouch, she slowed as if entering a chapel. "That dog has been through more than weather," she said softly. Marcus nodded, keeping one hand on Blizzard's shoulder. "He brought us Archer's tag and a note. 3 days old." Amelia's face changed, not sharply, but enough. A quiet tightening around the eyes. Everyone on base knew the name Benjamin Archer. Young, kind, 24 years old, the kind of Marine who wrote letters to his mother every Sunday and kept peppermint candy in his pocket for the working dogs. He had disappeared during a winter navigation exercise months earlier, and those search teams had covered miles of frozen woods and ravines. The trail had gone cold. Officially, the file remained open. Unofficially, most people had stopped speaking of it because hope, when stretched too long, can start to hurt. Amelia knelt beside Blizzard and opened her scanner near his collar. The device gave a small beep, then another. A microchip number appeared on the screen. Her breath caught. "This is Archer's assigned K9. Marcus looked at the dog, then toward the white darkness beyond the gate. "They said his K9 was never recovered either. His name is Blizzard," Amelia whispered, as if the dog might recognize the dignity of being called correctly. At the sound, Blizzard lifted his head. His ears trembled. His eyes found Amelia, then Marcus, then the road. Not random, not confused. Waiting. Marcus felt the air shift around them. The storm was no longer just weather. It was a message with teeth and ice, and Blizzard had dragged himself through it to deliver the first word. Amelia checked his pause, his breathing, the temperature of his ears, the slow but steady beat beneath his ribs. "He needs the clinic," she said. "Warm fluids, rest, monitoring." Blizzard heard her tone more than her words and struggled to stand. His legs shook, but his gaze stayed fixed on the north road. He took one step, nearly fell, then pushed his nose against the pouch. Marcus understood before anyone said it. "He is not done." Ellis swallowed hard. "Sergeant, we cannot send him back out." Marcus looked at the dog's trembling body, then at the name tape wrapped around the pouch, then at the storm swallowing the tire tracks beyond the gate. "No," he said quietly. "We do not send him. We follow what he already survived to show us." Amelia looked at him for a long moment, caught between medicine and mercy. Then she reached into her bag, pulled out warming wraps, and secured them gently around Blizzard's legs and chest. 15 minutes, she said. "We stabilize him here. Then if he still points north, you take a rescue team, and I come with you." Blizzard lowered his head against Marcus's knee, not in defeat, but in trust, and for the first time that morning, the wind seemed to quiet around them, as if even the storm had paused to listen. The 15 minutes passed like a prayer held between clenched teeth. Inside the guard shack, the heater rattled against the cold, pushing weak warmth into the small room while snow tapped the windows in restless patterns. Blizzard lay on a folded wool blanket near Marcus's boots, his chest rising and falling under the warming wraps Dr. Amelia Brooks had placed around him. A shallow bowl of water sat by his muzzle, and every so often he lapped it at once, then turned his head toward the north road as if afraid the trail might fade without him watching it. Marcus sat beside him on an overturned supply crate, one hand resting lightly between the dog's shoulders. He could feel the trembling slowly ease, but not the urgency. That stayed. It lived in Blizzard's eyes. It lived in the way his ears lifted every time the wind shifted. Outside, Corporal Reed and Private Ellis helped load emergency gear into a snow-capable Humvee. Blankets, radios, flares, medical packs, a thermal camera, 2 shovels, and enough fuel to keep the engine running through the worst of the morning. Nobody spoke louder than necessary. Hope had entered the checkpoint, and it made every man careful. Amelia checked Blizzard's gums, then listened to his heartbeat with her stethoscope, her face close to the white fur at his neck. "He is still weak," she said, "but his heart is steady." Marcus looked down. "You hear that, boy? Steady." Blizzard blinked once, then pressed his nose against the field pouch. The pouch now rested in Marcus's jacket pocket, zipped close to his chest, but the dog still knew exactly where it was. Amelia watched that small gesture and shook her head, not in disbelief, but in wonder. He kept this dry in a blizzard, she said. He understood it mattered. Marcus rubbed his thumb over the worn seam of his glove. Some dogs are trained to follow commands. Some are born knowing what a promise sounds like. Blizzard lifted his head at Marcus's voice. His gaze softened for 1 second, and in that second Marcus saw more than a working dog. He saw loyalty shaped by hunger, cold, distance, and a kind of love no uniform could issue. Then the radio cracked from the counter. Reed's voice came through the static. Sergeant Hayes, vehicle is ready. Marcus stood. Blizzard tried to stand with him. His back legs shook, and Amelia immediately reached to steady him, but the dog leaned away from her hand and faced the door. 1 step, then another. Slow, painful, determined. The guard shack fell silent. Even Ellis, young and restless, had no words. Blizzard reached the threshold and paused, nose lifted into the knife-cold air slipping beneath the door. He sniffed once, then gave a low, breathy sound and turned his body north. Marcus opened the door. Snow rushed in, bright and wild. For a moment, Blizzard stood framed against it. White fur against white storm, nearly disappearing except for those amber eyes. Marcus crouched beside him and clipped a soft support lead to the torn collar, careful not to pull. You lead, he whispered. We will carry the weight. Blizzard stepped into the storm, and the Marines followed. The wind cut through their jackets and scarves like the edge of a blade. But Blizzard moved forward without hesitation, ears pricked, nose low, scanning every drift and shadow for the faintest sign of life. Marcus kept his hand lightly on the lead, letting the dog set the pace while he and the other Marines followed close behind, boots sinking into knee-deep snow with every step. Visibility was poor. The storm had thickened, wrapping the treeline in a haze of white, yet Blizzard seemed to know exactly where he was going, guided by instincts sharper than any compass. At intervals, he would pause, lift his nose to the air, and glance back at Marcus as if to confirm the team had not fallen behind. Each time, Marcus felt a wave of respect and awe, understanding that the dog was not just leading but teaching, showing what patience and persistence could accomplish even when the world seemed determined to hide what mattered most. Corporal Reed pointed toward a barely visible outline in the snow, and Marcus squinted. Blizzard had stopped, body rigid, and paw pressed against a compact mound beneath a pine. The dog's amber eyes flicked toward Marcus, then back to the mound, the weight of urgency clear in every line of his stance. Marcus approached slowly, careful not to startle the animal, and knelt beside the snow-covered bundle. It was PFC Benjamin Archer, curled up against a tree root, wrapped in a thin, sodden jacket, teeth chattering but eyes alert. Blizzard pressed closer, nudging him gently with his nose, then stepped back just enough for Marcus to assess. Marcus carefully pulled a thermal blanket from the pack and draped it around Archer, checking for signs of frostbite and warmth. You made it this far, Marcus whispered, voice low, steady. Archer gave a faint nod, eyes wide, disbelief mingling with relief. Blizzard circled them once, scanning the area, and then settled close by, body pressed protectively against the young Marine's side. Amelia, checking vitals and adjusting the blanket, said softly. He knew exactly where to find him. This dog understood the mission. Marcus nodded, glancing down at Blizzard, amber eyes meeting his, and in that moment, the storm outside seemed to fade, the howling wind replaced by the quiet rhythm of breaths and the muted crunch of snow beneath boots. Each second stretched, heavy with gravity and grace, as if the mountain itself was holding its breath, watching a small miracle unfold. Blizzard pressed his head against Archer's chest, and Archer, shaking but conscious, reached out a trembling hand to stroke the white fur, a gesture of trust and gratitude. Marcus felt the weight of the morning lift slightly, replaced by a pulse of quiet triumph, knowing that through determination, instinct, and unspoken loyalty, they had reached the point where hope had seemed impossible just hours before. The team worked together in near silence, moving Archer carefully toward the Humvee, Blizzard leading every step, vigilant and unwavering, the embodiment of courage born from love, training, and unwavering purpose, guiding them back from the white expanse of the storm into safety. The Humvee waited with its engine running, a dark shape breathing warmth into the storm, but the path back had changed while they were gone. Snow had drifted over their own tracks, smoothing the world into one endless white sheet, and the pine branches sagged low under the weight of ice. Marcus helped guide the stretcher while Corporal Reed held the thermal camera high, searching for the faint line of the road beneath the storm's confusion. Private First Class Benjamin Archer lay wrapped in blankets, weak but conscious, his lips moving every few moments as if he were counting breaths. Blizzard would not leave his side. Even with the support lead loose in Marcus's hand, the white German shepherd kept pressing close to the stretcher, limping when the snow grew deep, stopping whenever Archer's breathing changed. "Blizz," Archer whispered once, barely loud enough to be heard over the wind. The dog's ears rose. His whole body answered before his voice did. He leaned in, touching his cold nose to Archer's gloved fingers, and the young Marine closed his eyes with a look of peace so sudden it made Ellis turn away. Amelia walked beside them, one hand steadying Archer's blankets, the other checking his pulse whenever they paused. "Keep talking to him," she told Marcus. "Keep him anchored." Marcus nodded and moved closer. "Benjamin, you are almost home. Your dog did his part. Now you do yours." Archer's eyes opened a little. "He would not go," he breathed. Marcus lowered his head to hear him. "What was that?" Archer swallowed with effort. "I told him to find help. He kept coming back." Blizzard gave a low sound, almost a sigh, and leaned harder against the stretcher. The words settled over the team heavier than snow. The dog had not simply carried a message. He had made a choice again and again, torn between the one he loved and the help he knew was miles away, until love itself became a trail through the storm. The wind rose sharply as they reached a shallow dip near the service road, filling the air with powder so thick that Reed vanished for a moment only 10 feet ahead. Marcus stopped the team. "Hold position." The world narrowed to breath, radio static, and the faint rattle of ice on canvas. Blizzard suddenly stiffened. His head turned left. Not toward the checkpoint. Not toward the Humvee. Toward a darker shape beneath a fallen branch half buried along the roadside. He pulled once on the lead, not hard, but certain. Marcus frowned. "What is it now, boy?" Amelia looked at the dog's posture and followed his gaze. "Sergeant." Marcus stepped toward the branch and brushed snow away with his glove. Beneath it was a second field pouch, smaller than the first, tied with a strip of white cord. No one spoke. Marcus opened it carefully. Inside was a photograph, protected in plastic, showing Archer in uniform beside Blizzard on a bright summer day, both of them looking younger, warmer, untouched by winter. Behind the photograph was a folded note in Archer's handwriting, shaky but readable. Marcus held it close to the light of Reed's flashlight, and read only the first line before his throat tightened. "If Blizzard finds you, please do not leave him behind." Marcus held the photograph and note close to his chest as Blizzard stood rigid, ears pointed, eyes scanning every drift of snow like a sentinel waiting for confirmation. The wind had softened into a fine, steady fall, each flake catching the glow of the Humvee headlights and falling in slow motion across the frozen road. Archer shifted slightly under the blankets, shivering, but alert, watching Blizzard with awe. Marcus unfolded the note completely, reading the words aloud for everyone to hear, his voice steady despite the chill. "If Blizzard finds you, please do not leave him behind." The weight of the simple request pressed in the quiet space around them. Blizzard nudged the pouch, then circled once, returning to press his head against Archer's chest, as though signaling that the promise had been acknowledged. Marcus lowered his face to the dog's level. "You kept your promise, boy." Every step. Blizzard gave a soft whine, leaning closer, amber eyes locked on Marcus as if to say, "We are not done yet." The team rose together, gathering the remaining gear, and Marcus helped lift Archer onto the stretcher while Blizzard walked ahead, his white coat glowing faintly under the lights, a living arrow pointing the path forward. Amelia and Ellis followed, one carrying a portable heat pack, the other a radio to update command. The snow crunched under boots, muffled by the thick layer over the road, and the pine trees stretched over them like silent guardians. At every turn, Blizzard paused, sniffed, and waited for the team to catch up, his patience steady as the heartbeat of the forest around them. The Humvee engine hummed a low, constant reassurance in the background, but Blizzard remained the guide, circling the stretcher when the path grew uneven, checking that Archer was secure, his own legs trembling from exhaustion but refusing to quit. Marcus felt the responsibility pressed gently against his chest, a reminder that the smallest creature could carry the heaviest truth, and that trust, when earned, could navigate storms far larger than any man alone could face. Hours seemed to compress into moments as they moved, the light from the base barely visible through the curtain of white, and every breath they drew seemed to bind them tighter together. Blizzard paused at the crest of a small rise, sniffing the air, ears pricked, then barked once softly, a signal that the checkpoint lights were now visible, pale and golden in the distance. Relief passed silently through the group. Marcus reached down, pressing a hand to Blizzard's neck. "We are almost home," he said. Blizzard pressed his head into Marcus's palm, letting out a single, long exhale as if he had been holding it for days. Archer stirred and whispered, "He did not fail me." Marcus nodded. Blizzard turned back toward the snow, scanning the line of trees one final time before stepping onto the cleared road, leading them gently, proudly, with a quiet confidence that carried the team back into safety and warmth, a living testament to loyalty, endurance, and the small miracles that sometimes move on four paws. Blizzard led the way with unwavering determination, the snow crunching beneath his paws and the faint light of the base flickering ahead like a promise. Each step was deliberate, measured, yet filled with an urgency that Marcus could feel in his chest. The young Marine, Benjamin Archer, was bundled securely on the stretcher, his eyes scanning the pale expanse of white around them, catching glimpses of Blizzard's fur moving like a beacon through the drifting storm. Marcus walked beside him, gloved hand brushing against Blizzard's flank whenever the dog slowed, murmuring encouragements in low, steady tones. "Almost there," he said, and Blizzard responded with a slight shift of his weight, amber eyes bright and focused. The storm had eased slightly, but the snow clung in gusts, swirling around them and making the world beyond the road nearly invisible. Private Ellis and Corporal Reed stayed close, carrying the remaining medical supplies, watching Blizzard's every move with a mixture of awe and relief. The path had narrowed into a small ravine, branches heavy with frost creating arches above their heads. Blizzard paused at the edge, sniffed the air, and then pressed forward with renewed strength, his white coat glistening with ice and reflected light. Marcus could feel the tension in the young Marine's grip on the blanket ease slightly as he sensed the safety of the approaching base. Amelia walked alongside, quietly monitoring Archer's vitals, her breath forming clouds in the cold air, yet her eyes never left Blizzard, who seemed to carry both courage and guidance in each step. A distant hum of generators reached them, a signal that warmth and shelter awaited beyond the next rise. Blizzard lifted his head and barked softly, low and measured, then turned to Marcus as if to confirm that they would follow. Marcus knelt briefly to meet the dog's gaze. "Lead the way, Blizzard," he said, his voice calm but full of respect, and Blizzard took the first step, confident and deliberate. The team followed, boots breaking through soft snow, eyes scanning the whiteness, hearts steadying with each passing second. Marcus noticed how the dog's paw lifted with precision, how every step seemed synchronized with the rhythm of their breaths, a silent cadence of endurance and loyalty. As the base perimeter lights came into clearer view, reflected off ice and snow, Blizzard quickened his pace slightly, nudging Archer gently with his nose to ensure he was aware of each movement. The young Marine's lips curled into a small, exhausted smile, realizing that despite the storm, despite the isolation, help was now tangible, near, and real. Marcus allowed himself a brief glance back, seeing Ellis and Reed steady the stretcher while Blizzard continued to lead with unwavering focus, and he felt a profound sense of gratitude swell within him. Each flake of snow seemed to pause in the air as if acknowledging the silent bond between man and dog, the journey that had carried them through the cold and uncertainty. Blizzard's amber eyes caught Marcus's, and for one perfect, fleeting second, the storm seemed to fade entirely, leaving only the steady sound of breaths, the soft crunch of snow, and the unspoken promise that they had followed the path laid out by courage, trust, and an unyielding devotion that would not be denied. The checkpoint gates opened before they reached them, and warm light spilled across the snow like sunrise arriving early. Marines rushed forward with blankets and a wheeled medical carrier, but no one moved carelessly. Something about the sight of Blizzard walking at the front made every person slow down, as if they understood they were not welcoming a rescue team back from the storm, but receiving a promise that had survived it. Marcus stepped aside as Amelia guided Archer toward the heated medical truck. The young Marine's face was pale, his strength nearly gone, yet his eyes stayed fixed on the white German shepherd. "Do not take him away from me," Archer whispered. Amelia leaned close, her voice gentle. "He is coming with you." Blizzard heard the softness in her tone and climbed onto the edge of the carrier before anyone asked him to. His legs trembled badly now. The mission had kept him upright, but the moment the gate closed behind them, his body seemed to remember how tired it was. Marcus caught him before he slipped, one arm under the dog's chest, the other steadying his shoulder. Blizzard did not resist. He simply rested his head against Marcus's sleeve, breathing in slow, uneven pulls. "Easy, Marine," Marcus murmured. "You made it home too." Inside the base veterinary clinic, the air smelled of antiseptic, warm towels, and coffee that had gone cold in a paper cup. Fluorescent lights hummed above the exam table while snow melted from boots and pooled on the rubber floor. Amelia worked with quiet speed, checking Blizzard's temperature, wrapping his paws, warming fluids, speaking to him in a steady voice that sounded more like prayer than procedure. Archer lay on a cot in the next room, separated only by a glass window. Even with blankets tucked around him and medics tending to him, he kept turning his head until he could see Blizzard. The dog noticed. Weak as he was, he lifted his muzzle and held Archer's gaze through the glass. Nothing dramatic happened. No bark. No sudden movement. Just two exhausted souls looking at each other across a few feet of light, both alive because neither had fully let go. Marcus stood in the doorway, watching in silence. Reed and Ellis had stopped outside the clinic room, hats in their hands, faces still red from the cold. The storm continued beyond the windows, but now it sounded farther away, less like a threat and more like something defeated by patience. Amelia finally placed her stethoscope around her neck and exhaled. "He is going to need rest," she said. Marcus looked at Blizzard's slow breathing. "But he will make it." Amelia touched the dog's white fur with the back of her hand, as if afraid to wake him too suddenly. "If his heart keeps fighting the way it has been fighting, yes." Marcus closed his eyes for 1 second. Not long enough for anyone to notice, but long enough to give thanks. Then Blizzard shifted, opened one amber eye, and looked past Marcus toward Archer again. Marcus smiled faintly. "All right," he said. "We will move his bed where he can see him." Amelia nodded, and together they rolled a padded recovery mat beside the glass. Blizzard was lowered gently onto it, wrapped in a warm gray blanket. Across from him, Archer raised 2 fingers in a weak salute. Blizzard answered with one soft thump of his tail, barely a sound, barely a motion, but enough to fill the room with something brighter than the overhead lights. By morning, the clinic was quiet except for the soft hum of heaters and the occasional shuffle of boots on the tile floor. Blizzard had moved closer to Archer, resting his head lightly on the young Marine's knee while Marcus watched from a nearby chair, gloved hands folded, eyes tracing the gentle rise and fall of the dog's chest. The amber eyes opened now and then, scanning the room, registering every movement of humans and machines alike, alert even in rest, but at peace in the knowledge that his mission had been fulfilled. Marcus leaned forward, lowering his voice, speaking to both Marines at once. He stayed with him through the storm. He guided him here. That is what loyalty looks like. Archer's lips curved faintly, a mixture of exhaustion and gratitude, and he reached out to stroke Blizzard's white fur, fingers tracing the line of a muscle hardened by training but softened by trust. Blizzard responded with a subtle thump of the tail, a pulse of acknowledgement rather than celebration, as if to say the work was never about reward. Outside, the snow had turned to a gentle flurry, the blizzard's edge receding, leaving the world beyond the clinic bathed in pale, shifting light. Through the windows, Marcus could see the snow mounds that marked the path they had traveled, the obstacles they had passed, and he could feel the weight of each step Blizzard had taken to carry them from danger into warmth. Amelia approached, clipboard in hand, quietly noting Blizzard's vitals, murmuring to herself about heart rates and breathing patterns, but pausing frequently to glance at the dog, her expression softening with each observation. "He has more stamina than I would have thought possible after such a journey," she said. Marcus nodded without speaking, understanding that Blizzard's determination had been more than physical. It had been a blend of instinct, purpose, and a bond that could not be quantified. Reed and Ellis moved supplies into the recovery room, giving space to the quiet trio, as if aware that even the slightest disturbance could undo the fragile calm. Blizzard, sensing the shift in energy, shifted slightly, curling his legs under his body, head resting lightly on Archer's blanket, amber eyes watching the young Marine's face with gentle attentiveness. Marcus rose slowly, moving to the window, looking out at the brightening day, allowing himself to notice the snow-laden pine boughs and the quiet settling of the storm. He could feel the change in the air, the promise of a day that was no longer about survival, but about recovery, trust, and recognition. Blizzard lifted his head, ears flicking toward the sound of the morning wind slipping past the clinic walls, then returned his gaze to Archer, as if to reaffirm that the bond between them had endured and that the young Marine was safe, seen, and never again alone in the white expanse. Marcus whispered, "You did it, boy," and Blizzard's tail thumped once, softly, a silent beat that resonated through the room, a reminder that some acts of courage require no words, only presence, loyalty, and unwavering care. 3 days later, the storm had passed into memory, but its silence remained inside the clinic like a visitor no one wanted to send away. Sunlight poured through the windows in clean white bands, touching the recovery mats, the folded blankets, and the water bowl beside Blizzard's bed. Outside, Fort Drum was waking under a bright winter sky, trucks rolling slowly over plowed roads, Marines crossing the yard with collars turned up, the world returning to routine, because routine is how people learn to believe they are safe again. But inside that small room, nothing felt ordinary. Benjamin Archer sat upright for the first time, wrapped in a gray fleece blanket, his hands around a paper cup of warm broth. His color had returned a little. His voice was still thin. Yet when Blizzard lifted his head from the mat, Archer smiled with a softness Marcus had not seen before. "Hey, partner," Archer whispered. Blizzard rose slowly, stiff from rest, but determined. Amelia started to step forward, then stopped herself. Some reunions should not be managed too closely. The white German shepherd walked the few feet to Archer's cot and placed his head in the young Marine's lap. Archer bent over him, one hand sinking into the thick white fur, the other covering his eyes for a moment. He did not sob loudly. He did not speak in grand words. He simply held the dog, like someone holding the last piece of home. Marcus stood near the door, arms crossed, his deep brown face calm, though his eyes carried the weight of everything he had witnessed. Reed and Ellis lingered behind him, quiet as church ushers. Amelia checked the monitor, then turned away with a faint smile, giving them space. Archer finally looked up at Marcus. "When I got lost," he said slowly, "I kept telling him to go. I thought if he reached the base, maybe he would live." His fingers moved gently over Blizzard's ears. But every time he left, he came back. He would not accept a world where only one of us made it. Marcus did not answer right away. He looked at Blizzard, at the torn collar now cleaned and resting beside the bed, at the field pouch on the small table with the photograph tucked inside. "Maybe he understood something we forget," Marcus said. "Being saved alone is not the same as being brought home." Archer closed his eyes, letting the words settle. Blizzard breathed against him, steady and warm, no longer fighting the cold, no longer carrying the burden by himself. Outside, a thin sheet of snow slid from the roof and landed softly below. No one flinched. The sound was gentle now, harmless. Archer opened his eyes again and looked down at Blizzard. "I owe you everything," he whispered. The dog answered by pressing closer, as if debts had never mattered to him. In that quiet room, beneath ordinary lights, the miracle did not look like thunder or glory. It looked like a tired dog resting beside the Marine he refused to abandon, and a sergeant learning that mercy is not always loud. Sometimes, it crawls through snow until someone finally opens the gate. 1 week after the storm, the north perimeter gate looked different in the sunlight. The same chain-link fence still hummed softly in the wind. The same security lamp still hung above the road. Snow still covered the fields in wide white blankets, but the fear had gone out of the place. It had become a marker now, a quiet witness. Marcus stood there just after sunrise with his hands in the pockets of his field jacket, watching breath rise from the mouths of the Marines gathered beside him. Archer stood among them, thinner than before, still moving carefully, but upright. Blizzard sat at his left side, wearing a clean working dog harness and a new tag that caught the morning light. The torn collar had been preserved in a small shadow box at the clinic, not as a symbol of damage, but as proof that love can travel far on broken things. Amelia stood near the front with Reed and Ellis, her eyes bright in the cold. No one made a speech at first. They did not need one. The silence carried enough. Then Archer stepped forward and looked down at Blizzard. The dog looked back with calm amber eyes, patient, steady, unaware of ceremony, aware only of the heartbeat beside him. Archer reached into his jacket and pulled out the folded note from the second field pouch. The paper had dried unevenly, the ink faint at the edges, but the first line remained clear. If Blizzard finds you, please do not leave him behind. Archer looked at Marcus. You did not, he said. Marcus shook his head gently. He made sure we understood. A small ripple of soft laughter moved through the group, the kind that comes when tears have already done their work. Blizzard rose and walked to Marcus, pressing his head briefly against the sergeant's knee. Marcus placed a hand on the dog's neck, feeling the living warmth beneath the white fur, and for a moment he was back in the storm, kneeling in the snow, seeing those amber eyes ask a stranger to believe. He understood then that the rescue had not ended at the clinic. It was still unfolding. In Archer learning to stand again. In young Ellis carrying extra blankets in his patrol vehicle without being told. In Reed stopping at the kennel each morning just to check the water bowls. In Amelia pausing before each exam to greet every dog by name. Mercy had changed the shape of their ordinary days. Archer clipped Blizzard's leash to the clean harness, and together they walked past the gate toward the open training road, not as lost souls returning from winter, but as partners stepping into a morning that had waited for them. Marcus watched them go, the sun spilling gold across the snow, the dog's white coat shining like a small flame against the cold. Some miracles do not arrive with thunder. Some do not ask the world to stop and look. They come quietly, through wind, through snow, through paws that will not quit, carrying a promise until the right hands are ready to receive it. And when they leave, they do not leave behind proof. They leave behind people who have learned to be kinder,